I'm Dr. Bob Arnott. Welcome to this course on machine learning in healthcare. You'll find a robust and wonderful set of tools to improve how you practice medicine as a doctor or better run a hospital as an administrator. This course will give you a fantastic overview of the key tools, easy to use platforms, and real world examples. At the end, we'll have real companies hiring machine learning experts. Whether you're looking for a career change or to acquire new and incredibly valuable skills, you'll find this course an incredibly interesting and fun starting point. We'll make everything crystal clear and simple so you'll be able to intelligently discuss machine learning with your colleagues and help your company, practice, or hospital move into the future with machine learning. So, what is machine learning? Remember sitting in a restaurant as a kid with a paper placemat that had a whole series of dots and numbers you were supposed to connect? Remember that at some point, before you connected all of those dots, you would recognize the pattern and say, oh, aha, sure, I get it. That's a car, or a bear, or a tree. Well, machine learning is based on the ability of a computer to recognize a pattern in data without the need for you to program the computer to do it for you. The data literally writes the program instead of you, which is why having great data and clean data is at the heart of any machine learning project. I interviewed the head of Penn Medicine's Innovation Center. He said to me, hey, look, Bob, machine learning, deep learning, they're more and more becoming commodities, more and more off-the-shelf applications, more and more code available on sites like GitHub. What makes deep learning and machine learning work is great data. And in an Ivy League medical center, the data is great given the incredible quality of clinicians. So if you're in data science, focus on creating great data platforms and squeaky clean data sets. So just like you learned pattern recognition as a grade schooler dining with your parents, pattern recognition gave birth to machine learning with a theory that computers can learn by themselves without the need for you to program them. And this could not be more fantastic for healthcare. Just as machines made human muscles 1,000 times stronger, machines will make the human brain 1,000 times more possible. And that's what Sebastian Thrun told the New Yorker. So you may still be saying, gee, I'm not a computer programmer, and this stuff looks way over my head. How can I possibly get any good at machine learning? Well, easy. More and more programs are plug and play with no programming. You just feed them the data and let her rip. Of course, like a sophisticated airplane on autopilot, you want to monitor the process and make fine adjustments to get better results. But it really can be that straightforward. So where artificial intelligence and machine learning has intimidated many of us and many businesses, the great little secret is it's becoming incredibly accessible. In this course, we're going to give you a solid foundation in the understanding of machine learning in healthcare and its uses. But there is no need to program by writing computer code. Phew, you don't have to write a single original line of computer code, promise. In later courses, we will give you cookbook code where you simply cut and paste the code into a working environment where you can add your own values and tune the model. You'll see a bit of that later, even in this introduction. Still, you won't have to do any original programming. To continue the airplane example, what really got the plane from A to B was very careful pre-flight planning. Pilots charted a course, checked the weight and balance, and fuel required. Preparing your machine learning journey depends on careful pre-planning, which largely involves preparing your data before you feed it into the system. So why is machine learning so vital to healthcare? The healthcare system as a whole has far too much information for anyone to analyze on a spreadsheet or even with standard statistical techniques. As an example, each one of us generates a phenomenal 2.4 gigabytes of data on our own every day. I love the term digital exhaust. Like a car spewing exhaust out of a tailpipe, we spew a steady stream of data exhaust all day long from our social media and iPhones, computer searches, wearable technology, medical tests, and health interactions. Now imagine you are a healthcare plan with 100 million insured. The amount of data is simply beyond comprehension for most of us. I did visit the largest insurer in the United States, United Healthcare, and discovered a giant room, 2 stories tall, that had these major health trends from all around the country on huge screens. They had a sophisticated data analysis program called Tableau that will comb through all the most critical data to look for important trends such as the arrival of flu season or spread of COVID and put it up in a highly graphical and understandable format. As doctors, nurses, and administrators, we can't even imagine what answers huge amounts of data will give to us. That's what's so exciting. Machine learning figures this all out and presents us these fantastic new patterns. What a thrill! There's a great aha moment like that kid in the restaurant where we look at him and say, it's a bear. A great recent example is the link between blood types and the propensity to become really ill with a COVID infection. Analyzing many patients in Italy showed a pattern no one expected. Type O blood types had a lower risk of becoming seriously ill with COVID. Another famous example is the link between inflammation and heart disease. We all thought heart disease was more related to cholesterol and high blood pressure, but it turned out as much as half was related to inflammation, and that led to a whole new way of thinking about treating heart disease. For instance, the cholesterol-lowering drugs ended up having a secondary benefit. They countered the effect of inflammation on the unstable plaques in your blood vessels, so they did not break off, allowing cholesterol to spew into your arteries, causing a heart attack. One clue was the risk of heart disease decreased on cholesterol-lowering drugs before the cholesterol level hit bottom. Another reason that pattern recognition is so great for medicine is that this is how doctors think and why it's been so hard for AI to mimic this way of thinking. For example, as a doctor, I remember walking into an emergency room in upstate New York to see a patient in the early evening with acute chest pain. There's something odd about the patient's pain and its severity that made me think, this really isn't a heart attack. The first thing I did was to reach out for a pulse in the foot. There was none. In the first 45 seconds with this patient, I reached a provisional diagnosis of an aortic aneurysm. This is when a tear develops in the largest and most powerful blood vessel in the body and cuts off the critical blood supply to key parts of the body like the heart and, in his case, the legs. I called the cardiac surgeon at home and told him we had to get his team ready. We quickly ordered all the supporting tests. The key insight, though, was that there's this whole package of questions, medical history, physical diagnosis, x-rays, scans, catheterization, lab tests to support the diagnosis. But the main reason the machines have such a poor time emulating how doctors think is that we don't always actively deduce like a detective. We see a pattern, we recognize, and we act. In this case, the patient's life was saved by fast and preemptive actions. As we will see with machine learning, lives are saved with the ability to recognize patterns early. This may be seeing brain clots, warning signs of impending death in the ER, or making an early diagnosis of breast cancer. In each case, lives may be saved, efficiencies improved, and finances bolstered. So that's why I totally love data. The pure joy of the insights it gives me while making me a better doctor. You may rightfully say, hey, you love the action and excitement of surfing towering waves in the middle of the Molokai Channel, or racing up a 9,200-foot peak in the middle of winter on tiny race skis, or serving in war zones. What possible excitement is there in data? Well, the greatest excitement of all, when truly amazing insights emerge from the data. Data allows them to be so much smarter and make so much better decisions. There's a real thrill to seeing answers emerge from the data, giving us answers, insights, and actions we never even imagined. Just like a little kid looking at a ferocious bear emerging from the dots on his paper placemat, the key to medicine, and in fact any big industry, is the analysis of data, and it goes beyond simple insights. Have a look at this chart. This shows the progression from insights on data through descriptive analytics, which allows you to see where you've been. This gives you 20/20 hindsight, maybe a big oops. Here is this giant mistake we made we could have learned from. For instance, in the height of the COVID pandemic in New York City, up to 89% of people died on ventilators, a terrible tragedy. Diagnostic analytics allowed researchers to delineate what the problem was, high ventilator pressures, and formulate how it might be solved. The publication of a large study in JAMA described this. But what to do? Working with one of the world's great medical centers, I prepared a series of videos showing that high ventilator pressures led to these poor outcomes, almost literally blowing people's lungs up. Some required as many as 5 chest tubes from the damage done by these high pressures. Our film clearly laid out the rationale for lower pressures. These pressures would spare the baby or uninjured lung, so the patient had a fighting chance of recovery. So let's go back to this chart. The great value in the future. The great value is to predict what will happen in the future, although the difficulty increases. Still, it's like predicting a train wreck. you're still going to have a train wreck. For instance, UCL London predicted 2.5 million American deaths from COVID, which left many of us anxious and even frightened. But we would still lose 2.5 million people. Now, take to the final step with prescriptive analytics. Go into lockdown and save 4,500 lives in 2 months. Then open up with universal mask coverage and careful social distancing. Save another 2 million lives. This is big data at its very best. In fact, staggeringly big data because you're prescribing changes for over 7 billion people across the planet. What a potential triumph. So to recap, the sequence is descriptive analytics, which gives you perfect 20/20 hindsight, predictive analytics, which shows you what's likely to happen, and prescriptive analytics, which allows you to change the outcome. In medicine, nothing trumps outcomes. Researchers very carefully follow patients' results to see which treatments work best, which medical centers get the best possible results. I wrote a book several decades ago called The Best Medicine. At one medical center, a patient had an 18% chance of dying during cardiac surgery, only 0.9% at the Cleveland Clinic. Where would you rather have your operation performed? Making this data available made cardiac surgery safer for everyone because hospitals realized that their report card would improve their results. In an individual medical practice, motor learning can also make you a better healthcare provider. Here's an example. Researchers at Houston Methodist Research Center in Texas used a machine learning review to look at mammograms and found they could read them 30 times faster than radiologists and with 99% accuracy. Big data. Stanford estimates that in 2020, healthcare will produce 2,314 exabytes of healthcare data. How much is an exabyte? This is 1 billion gigabytes. 5 exabytes is equivalent to every word ever uttered in any language throughout the whole history of mankind. And that's why AI and machine learning is coming into its own, because this is the only way to look at numbers that big. What's intriguing about motor learning, and only when there were huge amounts of data was there enough to power AI, especially deep learning. What makes big data big? It's a common misperception that we have lots of data, therefore must be big, like a spreadsheet with a million rows. It doesn't. Big is not based on volume alone. Here is what makes big data, the 3 V's, volume. Healthcare wins big here with 2,314 exabytes of healthcare data. So let's check that box. Velocity. Picture a large ICU filled with very sick patients, each generating staggering amounts of real-time data. This adds velocity to the data since every second you have much more data added. Again, AI wins because it's uniquely keeping up with real-world velocity of this incredibly important data. And finally, variety. We saw in the introductory course data needed to predict outcomes in epidemics. This data comes from a variety of sources. Let's look at some of the sources. Satellite data, social media, crowd swarming by tracking cell phone locations, mining social media, ProMed Mail. Very different from just some columns and rows in a spreadsheet, I'd say. This is the variety of data needed to fulfill the definition of big data, and medicine does this in spades. Take an ICU again. You have EKG traces, CT, MRIs, numerical values for lab tests, mountains of data emanating from monitors, looking at everything from pulmonary artery pressure to heart rhythm and blood pressure. So when someone mentions big data, pin them down. It's not just big, it has to have the 3 V's. And this has been impossible to look at with routine statistics and data. With good, clean, well-formatted data, the world is yours. Even as a novice embracing machine learning, you'll have a huge leg up on the competition because of your willingness to embrace the future. And we'll teach you how to analyze some incredibly important data sets, including great cancer detection. So, first, let's look at some very popular machine learning tools from popular applications you may use right now. Facebook. Okay, we all love to upload our latest fun pictures of our friends. Facebook uses machine learning to predict what the names are that go along with the pictures. Netflix. Wonder why Netflix is so good at guessing what movies you want to look at next? They use machine learning, which learns from all the previous movies and films you've watched to make a best guess. Gmail. Notice how this popular email program decides which of your email is important, what's unimportant, and what's just plain junk? Again, machine learning determined what your junk mail was on the thousands of previous emails you have received and how you treated them. Now let's look at some great machine learning applications for healthcare from Health Catalyst. Reducing admissions. This is a huge problem for hospitals since they are often penalized if a patient has to be readmitted after discharge. Machine learning can reduce readmissions. Your doctor can receive daily guidance on who is at highest risk of readmission and what specific steps he or she might take to reduce the probability of readmission. Prevent hospital-acquired infections. 40% of patients die when their central line becomes infected. Now doctors can follow the patients at highest risk and work to reduce these factors. Reduce hospital length of stay. Long hospital stays cost insurance more money and also penalize hospitals. Machine learning helps to identify patients predicted to have longer hospital stays. Predict chronic disease. From high blood pressure to chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and cancer, being able to predict high-risk patients is at the heart of any public health strategy and good preventive effort. Machine learning helps identify those patients so doctors can come up with solid prevention and predict no-shows. As we saw in the introductory course, no-shows can cost doctors and hospitals millions of dollars and block times when other patients might be seen. Sophisticated machine learning models allow health systems to accurately predict who won't show up, when they won't show up, and how they might be rewarded to show up on time next time. Training data. The great intrinsic beauty of machine learning is that we don't have to teach the computer, which means we don't have to write thousands of lines of incredibly complex computer code. Instead, the computer trains itself. How? The computer muses over the data and looks for patterns in the data. Once it does, the computer finds a way of describing that data using a formula called an algorithm. So the heart of getting great results is having fabulous data for the computer to learn on. What's an example? Let's say you have 100,000 mammograms which have been read by the world's finest radiologists. Say half have tumors and the others don't. The computer then learns every last nuance of the images until the computer diagnosis matches that of the very best radiologists in the world. So in other words, when we feed in training data, we already know the correct answers and wait for the computer to learn every last important feature of the cancers. Then we go and test it to find out how well the computer's done. If there's a very clear, sharp distinction between cancer and no cancer, the computer has done a great job. But it can do what's called overfitting, which simply means the computer is drawing a crooked and curvy line through all the data to try to make up for bad data or a flawed method before putting it into production. Finally, after you've trained the computer and tested, you are ready to make decisions on real-world data, perhaps from your own hospital or medical practice.